Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's Aspiring Speakers Lightning Talks event. Let me introduce myself first of all. My name is Abby. I work with the Aspiring Speakers group and approximately 15 different communities, all of which are free and run by RecWorks. We are a tech recruitment company with a massive difference. As a company, obviously, we're always on the lookout for more clients, and some of our best clients have come from community members who recommended RecWorks to their internal talent team. So if you're hiring for a new team or you're working for a company that is, please do let us know. If you want to know more about what we can offer, just ping me a message on LinkedIn or Slack or Twitter. My name is as you see it on the screen. And we really look forward to chatting with you about that and working with you. So what's the difference, I hear you ask? Well, also as a company, we really do believe that recruitment can be a force for good in the industry beyond just placing people in jobs. We have a particular focus on learning, mentoring, and personal development. If people want to learn and others want to share their knowledge, we are more than happy to connect you through our communities and events. We see this as giving back to those we've worked with in the past, but also paying it forward to those we hope to work with in the future. Earlier this year, we made our 5,000th introduction through our Meet a Mentor community, and that does what it says on the tin. You can be a mentor or a mentee and you get connected. And it's brilliant to see that, and we're really looking forward to making our next 1,000 introductions in that community. So as I've already said, we love to give opportunities for people to connect, and this event is part of that. Again, if you'd like to know more about any of our communities, get in touch with myself or Helen Lewis or Barry if you know either of them, and we can take it from there. We have 4 speakers for you today. I'm really excited to hear what they've all got to say. Today's session is being recorded and it will be available on our YouTube channel. I will put the link to the chat as we go through the event today, so you'll have it ready. With no further ado, though, let me hand over to our first speaker, Fahad. Over to you.
Hi, everybody. Just one second. I'm going to share my screen and we can get started. Okay. Right. Is everybody able to see my screen?
Yep, all good.
Okay, cool. Excellent. All right. So, so this talk came out of the Aspiring Speakers Workshop, and this title I just took it directly from that. But I would like to try and talk about my passion, which is test and development, and and I think it genuinely does level up your and help you build better software and improve your software development skills. So that's what I'd like to talk about today. So who am I? I'm Fahad Sheikh. I'm a consultant, a software engineer. I've been working in London, for commercially 15 plus years. I've been writing software commercials for more than 15 years, but personally, I've been programming for longer. I really like to work with teams and individuals, and really can't believe that software development should be easy and accessible. And that's sort of my mission. And I'd like to basically improve the world by helping teams and individuals achieve that. And I think system development goes a long way towards that mission. Also, I've got interest in classic retro gaming, so old consoles and new. I'm a mentor on Meet a Mentor group, and also on the Lunchtime community. I'm a dad. I've got 2 wonderful daughters, and a wife to look after. So that's what occupies most of my time. So I can be reached on Twitter at my Twitter handle, either Slack, or if you feel like emailing me, please don't hesitate to contact me at me@fahadshake.co.uk. So next, I'd just like to kind of give an idea about who I like to aim this talk for. So it's actually for junior developers who would like to, for example, get better at the craft because they're just getting started in the industry. They might have come from the university where they've been writing code, but nobody's ever told them what tests actually are. and how this can improve their coding. Software engineers, so for example, who may have heard of test and development, but never really understood why should you write tests first, because test driven really in my head is writing tests first. And also, as I've written down, people like to watch videos at 2.5x speed because you just want to get there at the end without actually getting stopped. And so this actually is a reference to how this can help you too. So if you're any of those people following this group, stay tuned. So, what is it? What is a test and development, and how do you write a unit test from a test first perspective? I'll just go through quickly. It's quite a short talk, so I don't really have a lot of time, but I'll try and actually summarize very quickly. So you start off, say for example, if you want to write a calculator, you start with a my calculator test. You write the test class first. Then you may need to import some sort of testing library in it, like JUnit, and then you write the first test method. For example, test can add 2 numbers because you want to say what you want to do test, and you've not written a piece of any implementation code yet. You start with creating a new class called my calculator. It doesn't exist yet, and then you try and create it, and you'll have a compilation error. You have to try and create a class. You carry on. You give it a method to add 2 numbers. You try that. You try and fix the compiler error for it. And then you might need to return and put this value into some variable. You put the value in a variable called actual, and then you check whether this is equal to what you expect. So it's quite simple. And this is what the pseudocode might look like, for example. And it seems pretty simple. So why do things this way? So first thing I would like to say is, it gives you rapid feedback that your code works. So when you wrote your test first, you are essentially clarifying your intent about what your code should do. So when I'm writing the calculator class, I'm not really worried about the entirety of what the calculator can do, because the calculator can do many things. But by writing my test first, the first thing I'm saying is that, well, I want it to see whether can it add 2 numbers. But even in this small example, there is other rooms for improvement. You might think like, well, does it only add 2, say, integer values, whole numbers, or does it need to support decimal numbers? Can you add more interesting values, like for example, complex numbers? So you can start adding those use cases, So and you can specify that your test, and you can get the feedback whether the code works, because you have to do an assertion at the end, as I did before. So this is something that helps. Second thing, it helps you to build an executable requirement spec. Now that's a wholesome word, but really what I mean is that you're actually asking questions and building guidelines for what the code should do before you're writing the implementation. And when you do it this way, so not only you've written the implementation for how, for example, the add function works, but you've also proven that you can test it, you can run the test and prove that this thing actually works. And when you build your code with these tests, one after the other, you're able to layer up all your functionality, and this is effectively your documentation and a requirements. But this is what my calculator is going to do. So this is what you get when you write tests first. And finally, it makes you a debug hero. Now, what does that mean? So, as I showed you before, when we wrote the tests, the first thing you have to try and think about is like, well, what are the kind of inputs I need my class to do? And when you process it, what is the desired output? So if you have a problem and you notice that it's probably in this class that you've written, you can find the problematic input, create the test for it, and look at the output, and you probably hopefully see the problematic output, change the implementation, fix the output, rerun the test. And if that's all there is, not only you've got a reproducible test, you fixed your issue and you have proof that you fixed the issue. So, having to do this, actually, this workflow helps you build this routine. So those are kind of 3 big reasons. These topics are quite deep. There's a lot we can go into in this, but it's a lightning talk, so I'll keep it brief here. So if one thing you would like to take, I would like for somebody to take on this is like, try test and development, and, you'll become the Jedi Master of coding listening. Maybe not, but, but you will at least hopefully improve your code quality And maybe I hope that I may have convinced one of you to try and actually do this more frequently in code. That's it for my talk.
Fantastic, thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Fahad? Yep, Rachel, go for it. Oh, sorry, you're applauding. I read the reaction wrong. My bad.
I actually have one.
Go for it, Anthony.
First, thanks, Fahad. That was an amazing talk.
Thank you.
It's hard to get people to try TDD for the first time, right? Sometimes I don't want to sound cocky, but it's kind of like, getting children to go to have a bath, they don't want to get in the bath any way that they can. Once they are in, they don't want to leave. So it's an interesting experience, right? So I generally do things by actually pairing with them, and I open my IDE and start writing some doubles and writing the tests, and they see all the IDE can do, and they look at it and they think that it's magical. But I can't pair with everyone. And lots of the times it boils down to the same discussion, like, oh, our code base is too messy, it's too untestable. Right, as you touch it, you write your first doubles, you write your first test, and you make it more testable. Oh, but this is going to be slower. No, it's actually going to be faster with time. You're doing an investment. But then they say, okay, no, it's really going to be slower, and basically the conversation dies off there. So if you would make a sales pitch and try to convince someone to try TDD, what would you do?
I would just tell them, if you ever have to debug the code that you've written, how much time would you spend in trying to replicate the exact use case that you're actually having problems with? How many production files you need to run? What are the kind of prerequisite steps you need to do, and how much time you spend in doing that? Versus, trying to run a test that already exists and you can run it immediately. I mean, that itself, that disproves the myth that writing tests takes time, because it's actually an investment into your code base and helps you debug faster in overall sense, because you're able to be very targeted exactly what you need to replicate. So that'd be like one way I would do it. The other thing is, really, some people can't be convinced. So it's because people are opinionated about these sort of things, and sometimes it doesn't make sense to do TDD, especially if you're just prototyping your code. So it really depends on those kind of projects. But most of the time, when you're writing production code, if you want to write tests, it helps you. Well, it's a good aim to actually have these tests and written tests first, because of the benefits you get when you write tests first. When you write tests afterwards, you get some of these benefits, but you don't really get all of them, because you're not really asking those questions initially. Go on, Abby, you were going to say something?
Yeah, only that Adirian had a question as well, so go for it. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for that. So you mentioned at the start that this talk was aimed at junior developers. I've seen some junior developers try to do TDD, and it becomes tiers-driven development in testing. So what recommendations would you have for them? Like, is there a repository they can go to? Is there a video you think they can watch? Something that might get them started? Yeah.
I think in my journey, I was kind of convinced when I first saw Robert Martin. So he came to my place of work, and he kind of did like live coding session with how to build like a stack data structure with test-driven development. And that's when I actually got introduced into the test-driven methodology. Like, for example, something quite simple as that, by looking at all the additional requirements, the edge cases, and building that out. That's what convinced me. So I think I would recommend that probably just search on YouTube for how to do test-driven development, like, for example, like example test-driven development things. And that might just help. Search for like Robert Martin, because he's like big into all of this sort of stuff. Also, I'd just like to say, I did put a star on junior, because I feel like that sometimes may come across as condescending, but I don't really, I feel it's more nice as possible, but it basically means people who are not really done tester and development as much, but not necessarily in age, wisdom, or life experiences. So yeah, I just want to clarify out there as well. So yeah.
Excellent, thank you. Any other questions before we move on? I will take that as a no. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Fahad. So our next speaker today is Mark. Over to you.
Thank you. I'll just go and try and set up my PowerPoint slides. Just give me a moment. Okay, is that coming through nice and clearly? Excellent, thank you. So, yeah, in this talk, I'm going to be talking about a technique for testing applications that have got lots of graphics in it. Now, to set the scene, I'll give a little bit of an introduction about me and what I do and why I'm dabbling in this curious method of testing. And I'll take a look at why the traditional methods of writing tests using JUnit, for example, don't quite cut it for what I'm aiming to do. And I'll talk about how I've actually extended our test framework so that we can actually test things with pictures. And I'll talk a little bit about the tooling which I've made use of to achieve that. And then just to finish off, so you can get a feel for how it works, I'll take you through some actual test results where we've got a test failure which I've had to analyze here. And I'll finish off by giving a summary about what I think of this technology. So first of all, a little bit about me. So I'm Mark Baird and I work for a company called Esri, and we're all about geographic information systems. So this is all about mapping and the analysis of geographic information and visualizing that. Now I work for our developer technologies group. So this is where we have products that allow developers to embed mapping and GIS capabilities into their own web, mobile and desktop applications. And the particular product I work on is a JavaFX desktop-based application. The main thing I want you to take from this slide here is the output of what I create is highly visual. So how do you go about testing this kind of application? Well, of course, the answer is we're like pretty much any other Java shop. We write unit tests, and some of these unit tests are fairly straightforward, like the source code I've got at the bottom, where I'm just sort of doing a basic assertion to make sure a conversion between degrees and radians is coming up with an acceptable value. We have more complicated tests. And of course, we run these and analyze the results via Jenkins. So we're not that unusual in terms of a Java development environment. But do these basic sort of assertions that come with JUnit 5 really enable me to be able to properly test what I'm working with? Now, to try to answer that, I want to show you a very typical and simple test case for the kind of thing that I want to be able to approve. So all I'm doing here is sticking a red dot on a map, and I want to be able to see whether that is acceptable. So the pass criteria for this test for me is that dot red? Is it a DOS? Make sure it's not a triangle, for example. Is it the correct size? Is it in the right place? That would be very bad. And just to convince people that it's in the right place, has the dot been drawn over a base map? So can I use a JUnit assertion to be able to answer all these questions? Well, I can start to go down that route. So I can take the symbol class that created that red dot and do an assertion to make sure that it's actually red. But something could have gone wrong here in the rendering stack in the low level rendering stack of the software. And although I've asked for that dot to be red, it could actually turn out to be green. So how would I detect this as an error? Now the answer is using image comparison. So I'm actually making use of a tool here called ImageMagick, which is an open source set of software for doing lots of image manipulation. It comes in a set of CLI tools. Now, importantly for me, this is a cross-platform tool, so it works on Windows, Linux, and Mac, so it works on all the platforms that I'm targeting in my product. Now, what I do in my test, where I'm just trying to display whether I'm trying to work out whether I've displayed that red dot on a map correctly, is that I will draw that and I will take a screenshot of that in my application, and I will store that image to disk. And then what my test can do is it can actually shell out to the ImageMagick compare tool, and I will pass in two parameters. So the first of which is the generated image from my test, and then I have a baseline expected image. And then what the ImageMagick tool will do is it'll give me back a score. Now, the way that works is if that score is very close to 0, that's a good thing. That means that the test passes and I can move on to the next one. But if something has gone wrong and it's slightly above a threshold, I need to sort of be able to look at this in more detail. So I will fail the test, and we need to pay a little bit of attention to this diff image that is created. So just going through a screenshot of some test results that I've recently had from Jenkins. I've got a test failure here for drawing some building textures, just very simple grayscale, and it's come up with an assertion failed error, and it's telling me that the actual image that I've created in the test doesn't match the expected one. So I can see here that I've got an image comparison issue. So we have another piece of tooling. So this is a very simple web application that allows me to be able to look at the images that we use in this test. So you can see on the left-hand side, I've got the actual image that came out of the test, and I've got the expected image. And just sort of looking at these two initially, I can't really see what's going on here, why this has actually failed. But this is the beauty of what Image Magic comes up with me, because it's come up with a diff image and it's highlighted the area of where this test has failed. So why am I getting sort of a failure here? And just going back to the actual image here, I can see this test has failed because we've failed to draw an entire building. So something's gone wrong here. Now, having actually analysed this, the reason this test failed is because somebody had actually changed the test data. That building no longer exists, so it's been removed. So in this case, I could just update the baseline image, so the next time I run this test, it'll pass. But that could have highlighted a significant bug in our code. So just as a summary, I've actually got hundreds of these tests in the test suite. They really are an invaluable tool for me for sort of testing these visual components. They really do identify bugs that a human eye could potentially miss. Now, is it all a rosy technology? Is everything good all the time? Mostly, but we do get problems with false test failures here, and they come about from data which changes. There is ways of working around that. But on the whole, I'm actually very positive about this technology. It saves me lots of time in sort of manual testing. So if you are working in a technology where you're producing graphical results in your application, I'd say this is definitely a technology which is worth considering. So with that, I'll hand you back to Abby.
Fabulous, thank you. Any questions for Mark? You're getting applause from Anthony. That's always nice.
Thank you.
I'll go again.
Sure.
In the risk of being the guy that likes his own voice too much. So I used to be a contributor on an open source project called OpenSUSE. It's a Linux distribution. And they have a test suite that was very interesting because it was not 3D modeling or rich application interfaces or anything like that. But they had to test the installer and GNOME and KDE and all of the desktops. So they used a pretty similar technology, taking screenshots, doing things inside of a VM, compare the image. They would have optical character recognition in order to extract things. When I was a contributor, I thought that, those tests are very brittle. Why were we doing that? But then I started working at using things like Selenium WebDriver to test interfaces. And I figured out that the image recognition with tolerance would actually be less brittle, fail for less reasons than before. So do you see this kind of visual test being adopting for things other than images and just like going mainstream for, I don't know, UI testing or other categories that we don't hear about so much?
Yes, I could do. I mean, I use this example for working in sort of mapping or sort of, looking at 3D data, but you could have a very simple display for something like a graph or a pie chart that you're displaying, or it could just be sort of an entire application. So we do actually use another product where we take screenshots of the user interface of an application, a physical application with buttons on it, and we sort of have tests that just sort of make sure that the right buttons are showing at that particular time, because you can write tests to sort of see whether a button is enabled or not enabled, but it might not be showing on the screen as that, and you can't be completely sure unless you actually take a look at it. So it is a very good technology for that. I mean, it does have its limitations. So one of the things that I'm very keen on is that once you've displayed that view, you need to be able to sort of interact with it and pan around it. And this is where a technology that doesn't help. So it doesn't tell me whether the frames per second when I'm sort of like animating around a building or a sort of a particular 3D model is working correctly or not. That's solved with a different set of tools, but it does help, just answer that question. Does it look right? And that's very difficult to do in sort of basic unit test assertions, because they lie, those results. You can say, is it red? No, it's coming out as green. So
cool. Fahad, you've got a question.
Right. So it's quite a nice talk linked to, we're talking about testing. So I was just going to say, is it possible when you do the testing to kind of define your output or whatever before you write the code and say, well, this is what we expect the image to look like, and then use that to drive the implementation? Is that something you guys try, or is it almost kind of like use it towards the end to verify the implementation?
So in terms of actually sort of generating the expected images, we have sort of two modes of running the test. So we have sort of a capture mode where you start off by collecting the expected image, and then you typically, when you're running the tests, we run those in sort of an image comparison mode. But when we're designing the tests, obviously we'll sort of come up with a sort of a description of what that expected output is, and what the tolerances are we're looking for, and the outputs that's being displayed. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks.
And of course, you have to have a certain tolerance in when you're sort of doing the image comparison. It's never going to be completely pixel perfect. Somebody could have made a change to the low-level rendering code, and there's one thing that's just moved to the left by 1 pixel. So you're never going to get a perfect match for this, because yeah.
Wonderful. Any other questions for Mark? I will take that as a no. So next up, thank you so much, Mark. That was really interesting. Next up, we have Carly. Over to you. If you're speaking, Carly, you're muted. Oh.
There we go. Can you?
Yeah, we go.
Hear me?
We can hear you now. Yeah.
Now, can I see my laptop? Perfect time to do a wobbly, but hey, we're here now.
Well done. You're back.
Hey, hello everybody. Nice to see you all today. Happy Friday. I see familiar faces, but for anyone who doesn't know me, my name is Carly Richmond. I'm a developer advocate at Elastic, and I am a front-end engineer as well. So I want to talk about synthetic monitoring today. I want to talk about a problem that I saw in all the years that I was writing front end, where on the SRE side, we'd be building workflow monitoring that was really similar to end-to-end testing. And then I'm going to do a whistle-stop tour of how we can use a common tooling to try and achieve both of these initiatives together.
We seem to have lost your sound again, Carly.
It's been taken on. Okay, there we go.
Back. Hey.
Cool. I'm not having a good day, am I? That's fine. So I was talking about end-to-end testing. I used to have to write these things all the time. And what they are is basically a replication of the user workflow. So we were talking about before, Anthony mentioned Selenium WebDriver. You can use things like Cypress and Protractors, what I used to use as well. But they basically allow you to write tests that replicate the user workflow. All easy peasy. Synthetic monitoring, on the other hand, is normally a tool that you'd think of for more of the ops or SRE side of the fence. And that is all to do with being able to monitor that your application is alive at a regular interval. So we normally think, oh, this is as simple as pinging a Java endpoint or something like that to see that our particular service is alive. But you can actually do funkier things like that. So there's a technique called browser monitoring, which actually allows you to upload scripts such as Selenium or Playwright or others that actually stimulate that user workflow as well. So what we have is a situation where developers and SRE are effectively building the same thing twice, because we're both replicating the user workflow to validate, but we're doing it at different points in the cycle. So one thing I'm wondering is, well, is there a way for us to do it together? And you know what? There is. So I'm going to talk about a tool combination of Playwright, Elastic Synthetics and Uptime, and GitHub Actions. The repo's there if people want to have a look, and I'll flag up the resources at the end of the talk, so don't panic if you haven't caught it yet. So the first thing, we need a sample project. So Elastic Synthetic is a wrapper that sits on top of Playwright that allows you to generate a boilerplate project for these monitors. So if you utilize the init command, which I've got up here, it generates a lovely little sample project for you, which includes some sample journeys written in TypeScript to help you get started. And then it also has your configuration for the project and the monitors within it. What does that config look like? Well, it looks a bit like this. I'm going to run through this super quickly since it's a lightning talk, but the key things I want to call your attention to are, for example, the URL. So this is the URL that my particular monitor is going to ping to run my particular journey on. And what you'll see is I've defined it as localhost. So this is what would be run from local development or being run when we spin it up within CI, potentially. But you know what? In production, I want it to hit something else. We still want to be monitoring our application at the end of the day as well as testing it. So what you'll see is that I change the URL to be my production deployment, so you can configure it that way. The second thing I want to call your attention to is the default monitor configuration. So this will apply unless you override it in one of your journey files, which I'll talk about in a minute. So you'll see that I've got the default schedule to be running every 10 minutes, and I'm running it on the UK Elastic Infra. You can set up private locations to run from your own infrastructure by installing the required agent, but I've not done that in this case, so that's blank. And then you'll see it's pinging my own Elastic deployment. So this will allow for me later to upload the required monitors that I'm running as part of my local development CI to actually do the production monitoring with Elastic Uptime. So you need to specify your Elastic cluster endpoint as well. Hopefully that's simple, but again, have a dig afterwards and let me know if you've got any questions. So what are we running? Well, we need to run these user journeys, right? That was the whole point. And this is an example of one that I've written myself. So Elastic Synthetics basically wraps on top of Playwright, and what it gives you is a journey and a step construct. And I really like this. We were talking about test-driven development before in one of the prior talks. For me, this idea kind of comes quite similar to behavior-driven development, i.e. it's not, although to be perfectly honest, it's not got the usual Gherkin syntax that we might be familiar with from tools such as Cucumber, but it's still a nice idea to think about the steps that a user is going to take within their workflow. And I just used Playwright as normal to be able to locate the elements that I want, ideally using test ID as a good best practice. And then I can perform these actions that we were talking about, similar in the question related to the imaging talk. We can perform clicks on the elements that we've found in these other very useful things. I can then run this locally. I've got my end-to-end test. I can develop against this particular monitor, so I know that everything's happy and working. But I want to be able to push these through. So you want to run these again as part of a pull request, for example, to validate on merging that everything's going to be all happy. But when you're actually pushing into main branch, you're going to want to do two things. So the running of the test is actually as simple as running the npx elastic synthetics command. I've actually set the working directory as the journeys file so that it knows where to pick them up. And then I'm going to publish the test results using a JUnit reporter. Just works like any JUnit test reporting that people might be familiar with. But you want to push these, because remember, we wanted to use the same monitors for production as well as for this testing, right? So what you do is you basically run the push command. This is all generated for you as part of that init wizard I showed before. And then what you'll do is you'll push the monitor configuration to the Elastic Uptime instance. You will need the API key. obviously you want to keep that hidden. Don't be putting that in this file for the world to see. And then your monitors end up in here. They will run at the specified interval. And then you can actually see, similar to what we saw with the image testing report, you can see what steps succeeded, what's failed, what your screenshots look like, and get some more details such as how long these steps are taking. And then you can start to do smart things that you'd want to do as an SRE, potentially adding alerts on, rules, anomaly detection, so that it yells at you when there's potential degradation in this particular workflow, so that you know that you've got to go and investigate. So all this came around this idea of DevOps, right? It's not meant to be about doing these particular activities in two different places. We want to unite the process and work together. And that therefore means that we need to use similar tools as well so that we can collaborate. And this is one example of how you can do that. If you want to have a play around, because the synthetic stuff is still in beta at the moment, so feedback is great, go check out the sample repo, give it a go with the steps in the blog article, or come and ask me. I'm more than happy to answer any questions. And with that, I'll hand back to Abby. Thank you.
Thank you, Carly. That was a really whistle-stop tour, but I love it. Thank you. That's great. Does anybody have any questions for Carly?
Okay, I'll fill the void.
You are the question guy today, Anthony.
So I'm not going to name the vendor because, yes, competition, but the same way that I told that junior developers kind of feel that JUnit is magic when I do TDD, I look at a tool that they are classifying these as acceptance test-driven development tools now. It looks very much like the one that you showed. You can have Cypress or Selenium tests. It takes screenshots. There's monitoring and alerts, so DevOps folks can know if something is broken and get alert. And it's also an interesting aspect of this tool was that you could basically give a read-only copy for users, and it acts like live documentation. If you want to do X, you click here, here, here with the screenshots from the test, right? And I was like, this is amazing. I was feeling exactly like folks seeing this as magical. But that was very proprietary and no trial. So basically, like I was, does this work for real? So other than, I know that your tool does 99% of it, but what kind of tools do you, is there anything open source that I can combine to get this kind of thing?
Open source tools. So, I mean, a lot of the stuff I did there, so the elastic wrap, the synthetic wrapper, and it's using Playwright, which is obviously open source. The elastic wrapper is actually licensed under MIT. So using that with GitHub Actions, you could probably do something. Uptime is obviously within Kibana, so that's covered under the dual license, so that's slightly different. But I mean, with the reporter being a JUnit XML, there's no reason that you couldn't use a reporter adapter if you wanted to do something that's totally open source, and then, or check out a reporter, and then that way that you've got something that can run intermittently. So if you want to go down the pure open source route, that's what I'd recommend. What I've seen from a lot of the monitoring side of things is that it's normally coupled in with a kind of proprietary software. So you look at things like Apica or New Relic or Splunk, who have similar offerings. It's all kind of a similar idea, and it's not open source. So I think the only thing that's going to be missing for you is the reporter. So that's what I'd go and have a look at if you want to go to that kind of pure avenue. I'll have another look and see if I can find anything else though. Because one of the things I found, this and real user monitoring are the two things that don't really come under, you know, the kind of open telemetry standard that is open and available to everybody. So I know there's a bit of a gap, but leave it with me. And if I find anything else, I'll ping you.
Wonderful, thank you. Any other questions for Carly? I'll take that as a no. That's absolutely fine. So with no further ado then, our last but by no means least speaker of the day is Adirian. Over to you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Oh, awesome.
Perfect.
Super. Hello, everyone. And I must say, it's been like amazing, brilliant speeches from the other speakers. So well done to everyone. It's been fantastic. Puts the pressure on me to, to deliver. But anyway, so my name is Ederin Atuma. I have worked across tech in different roles, from a developer to a tester to SDET, the test manager, head of delivery. But in my current existence, I'm actually moving into public speaking. I talk a lot about leadership, legacy, and mindset. And part of what I talk about is what we'll go through today. Right. So before I start my talk, I always do this, because I say this to myself every time, that I wake up every day knowing I'm going to make a difference that day. And I say it in all my speech, and I welcome you to say it with me if you want. So I'm going to say, join me if you want. I am going to make a difference today. Okay. If you said that, well done. And I really hope that comes true for you. Okay, so today the title of my talk is Do It. Do it. There's no just, it's do it. Always do it. And who is this talk aimed for? I'm really looking at people that are uncomfortable with making choices, outside of your comfort zone. I'm hoping that this talk would get you to the point where you become comfortable with making uncomfortable choices, out of your comfort zone, or things that you're used to. And I'll give you 3 reasons why it is actually good for you to think in this direction. So the first reason today is that when you make choices that seem uncomfortable for you, it opens you up to new experiences in life. All things become new. Is not, that there's the same old. When you say, hey, how's everything going? How's work? How's stuff? And all you hear is same old. I hardly really use that, because I don't like same old. I like new things. I like to experience new things. I like to experience unique things, and I'm intentional about making, those choices to experience stuff, and I go for it. Okay. Why is this important? Right now, there is a lot of anxiety, like social media stuff everywhere, overrating talent, and is making people feel like they have to play safe and they have to play small, because they don't believe that they have enough in them, or what other people have, to be able to make a difference in their life, showing up for themselves. But what nobody ever tells anyone is that talent alone does not determine the outcome of your life, but your choices do, right? So there are many talented people in the world today. They're full of potentials, but they don't really turn up for those potentials. They don't show up for themselves. And the reason they don't is because they believe, or they feel like it is the responsibility of the world to recognize their talents and reward them for it. It doesn't work like that. It is our responsibility to show up for ourselves and want to live our best life in the best possible way we can. So I have a quote. I said, if you want new and unique experiences, you need to make new and unique choices that are out of your comfort zone. And the second thing about that is you need to be committed to executing on those choices to the point of reward. When I say reward, I'm not talking about money or whatever. It's about the lesson. Because every time you try something, you learn. And that lesson in itself is a reward, right? Get comfortable with the fact that there is, people say failure, but I say falling. You try something, you fall. When you fall, you get up and you move. But when you try something and you feel like you fail, that is a very terminal state. You don't recover from that. But when you fall, you can get up and you walk back up. Okay. So when you don't play it safe, when you don't overrate talent, when you just believe in the choices, you understand, you open yourself to new opportunities. I give an example of, I was in an organization at the time, I was working as a tester. There were a lot more senior people ahead of me that tried to deliver a project for over a year. They couldn't. These are well-paid, experienced, seasoned people. They couldn't do it. But I saw that I could do this thing. At first, I doubted myself that, look, All these people in front of me with all the experience and everything they had, they couldn't do it in 1 year. What is possessing you to think that you're actually going to be able to do this? But I was so scared. I was so worried. I was concerned. I was anxious. But you know what? I stepped into it anyway. I said I was going to take it on. And guess what? I took that project on and delivered it in 3 weeks. You know, was I scared? Yes. If that went wrong, my time there is done completely. But I was ready to take that. I was ready to take the lesson. And you know the outcome of this? I was elevated to lead the entire program. You know, that is a reward. Though I've left that organization, I still get recommendation to speak from the leaders there at the time, because I was the only guy that stepped up and, you know, took action to do something. So that singular action has actually, you know, released me to a new experience in terms of what I want to do going forward in the future. And the second reason why I think you should make uncomfortable choices is because these choices reveal your true self to you. Everyone, your family, your friends, the internet, everyone has an idea of who they think you are. But each time you show up for yourself, you discover more about you in ways that no one will ever understand. I hear statements like, oh, that person is so smart. The talent is just pure. No one can beat that. Oh, I wish I can be as good as this guy. Yes, those things exist. But you know what? What no one says is that these people you admire, they go through anxious moments. They go through uncertainties. They make uncomfortable choices to show up for themselves, to discover themselves, and keep reinventing themselves. You know, so the world, like I said, everybody would unconsciously present you, you know, with parameters or situations, a script about who they think you are. But it is your choice. Every day you wake up to turn up for you and perform to the best of your potentials every point in time. I once went into a speaking club. I was the only non-native English speaker there. It was terrifying to speak, but I rose up, I spoke. Even though some people talked me down, I was like, well, that's your problem. Someone says you speak like you're chewing hot yam. I said, well, this is the way I talk. It's either you open yourself to hear my message or that's up to you. So I show up for myself every time to be the best person that I can be. And the final thing I want to tell you is reward your brain. What is rewarded is repeated. So your brain, your mind will always give you suggestion for bold, positive, creative opportunities and ideas. Every time you choose to take action on that, you're rewarding the brain, and the brain will keep suggesting more things to you. So in conclusion, don't be afraid to make choices that make you look different, because if you're not different, you're not needed. Thank you. I'll take questions if there are any.
I haven't got
amazing. Sorry.
Go for it, Fahad. Go for it.
It just came out. I mean, that's amazing. Thanks so much for sharing your story. I just wanted to say it out loud rather than with the emotional clapping. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I haven't got a question so much, but I really love it when you come and speak, Adiri, because these themes come up a lot, don't they? And I find it really interesting because I'm sure you've all heard of Brené Brown. She speaks about vulnerability and putting yourself out there and taking that risk, and that's just been ringing for me while you've been speaking as well, Adiri. And it is that thing, isn't it, of actually make an uncomfortable choice, put yourself out there. That means you do have to be vulnerable, but the reward is that actually the benefit you get from that and the things you learn from that experience will help enable you for something in the future that would again be outside of your comfort zone. And so it just allows you to keep kind of chipping away at that being outside of your comfort zone, doesn't it? And yeah. Has anybody got any questions for Adirin?
Yes, I have a question.
Go for it.
First of all, thank you so much for that really amazing talk. It was really positive and inspiring, and just reminds us to all try and keep a positive mindset when we can. So thanks for that. I think I also find it quite refreshing to hear this kind of talk at a tech type environment. I'm sure that we've all felt that at some point, at least in our lives. I feel it multiple times during my technical career. But I think we maybe as teams don't speak about it a huge amount, even though it's something we're probably all going through. So I just wondered if you had any tips about how to kind of keep up an open dialogue about that in a team situation, if you think that's relevant. Yeah, we'd just like to hear your thoughts, and thanks again.
Absolutely, thank you. That's a really good question. For me, the thing I always try to tell people is be comfortable and be vulnerable, right? Knowing that the worst that can happen is you learn. And always know that the next person you're looking at is just as anxious or feeling the same way as you, but they don't say it, right? So just opening up yourself to whatever the experience bring. I find it, quite, it works for me. I just settle some things in my mind before I step out to say, okay, boy, you're going out. You might make a mistake, given. You might say things that might be incorrect, given. Somebody might not like what you say, given. It might all fall over. That's okay. So I get comfortable with all the negatives, all the things that could go wrong. So I accept those, and then I go on full throttle on all the things I know can go right. And that's what I want to present. Because when you think like that, it covers your errors, but colors your effort. So people tend to bring your errors to the fore and leave the efforts behind. You notice that when people start to apologize before they even speak, apologize before they do anything, But when you put your errors, you cover them. Just color your effort. Everybody listening to you, watching you, they want to see you succeed. They are there to see you perform. So just accept the fact that mistakes will be made, things would happen, but also accept the fact that you're a really good person, you're an amazing person, and you have a lot to give to the world. I don't know if that helps. And Rachel.
Yes, very much so. Thank you so much.
Any other questions for Adirian? I will take that as a no. So all that is left for me to say today then is thank you so much to each of our speakers, to Fahad, Mark, Carly and Adirian for coming and sharing some of what you know. It's been such a great range of talks and really interesting to hear from each of you. Thank you to everybody who's joined us and anyone who is joining us online. I hope you've enjoyed these talks and we look forward to seeing you at our next session. Just as a little heads up, Fahad mentioned at the start of his talk about doing the Aspiring Speakers Workshop. We do have workshops available, so if you want to know more about that, just ping me a message on Slack or LinkedIn, and we can obviously set you up with the next workshop when we have that going. So please do get in touch if that's of interest. If you're watching these talks and going, I'd really like to get into that, but I've no idea how to start, the workshop is for you. That's what we run it for. So yeah, if you're interested in that, please do let me know. It would be great to see you at one of those workshops and then doing a lightning talk yourself. That would be amazing. And we've got so many comments coming through on the chat as well to say great talks, and everybody's really enjoyed them. So thank you again, everybody who's physically here and everyone who's online. I hope you've really enjoyed it, and we look forward to seeing you all again soon at our next lightning talks. Take care.
Thank you. See you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.